In the history of the Oscars, only Bob Hope and Billy Crystal have emceed more often than the legendary Johnny Carson.
As the king of late-night television, Johnny Carson had his standard for talk shows. But despite his legendary status and demeanor, Carson had moments he absolutely hated. From embarrassing interviews to uncooperative guests, Carson faced his share of challenges. But how did he handle these unexpected twists? Join us as we uncover 27 moments Johnny Carson hated the most. Number 27. The day Johnny Carson silenced his producer. In 1992, Johnny Carson went back to hosting The Tonight Show following the sad loss of his son Ricky in a car crash. During the show, he gave an unplanned, heartfelt tribute to Ricky, talking about his passion for photography and the shortness of life. While Carson was speaking, the show's producer signaled to wrap it up, concerned about going overtime. This made Carson very angry. Lawrence Lemur's book, King of the Night, describes how Carson's anger was evident while on the air. As a result, de Cordova was no longer allowed on the studio floor for the rest of the show's run. Ed McMahon wrote in his memoir that Carson was always very private, and this incident made him reveal his sadness in a way he never intended, which affected him even after the cameras were turned off. Even though some moments were filled with sorrow, one guest pushed his patience to the limit. Number 26. Bob Hope wore out his welcome. Johnny Carson often had comedian Bob Hope as a guest on his show, but Carson did not enjoy it. In the 1970s and 1980s, Hope's appearances became predictable with scripted jokes and no real conversation, which Carson found boring. Carson would sigh every time he heard Hope was coming back on the show, but turning down NBC's most popular star was not possible. As Hope got older, his worsening hearing and vision made the TV appearances even harder. Producer Peter Lasley shared that Carson once said that if he ever ended up like that, someone should end his suffering. Number 25. The Night Charlie Callas pushed too far. Charlie Callas was a popular and energetic performer on The Tonight Show, famous for his funny noises, flexible face, and crazy physical comedy. However, in 1982, he did something that made Johnny Carson, the host, upset. During a joke that did not go over well, Carson made a sound effect to show it was a failure. Instead of taking it in stride, Callas physically reacted by pushing Carson. This ended his appearances on the show. That shove marked the conclusion. Carson did not find it funny, and his expression became serious. He warned the person not to repeat the same mistake, his tone cold. Afterwards, he walked away, showing that he was not pleased. This simple action was enough to make the person understand. Carson backstage told producers that Callas was not allowed to come back. He was serious. The ban was quick, lasting, and could not be changed. Carson may have been friendly on stage, but there were unwritten rules, and one of them was no physical contact. He liked having unusual guests, but he did not like unexpected actions, especially in front of a live audience. It wasn't about being funny, it was about showing respect. Number 24. The Tomahawk throw that split a nation. In 1965, actor Ed Ames appeared on The Tonight Show to show off his Tomahawk throwing skills. Known for playing a Native American on Daniel Boone, he threw the axe, and it hit the target right in the middle. The audience burst into laughter for almost a minute. Carson, who was still new to hosting, was momentarily surprised by the unexpected joke. In the 1960s, the comment made on television was daring. However, the host bounced back with a famous joke saying, "I did not even know you were Jewish." While the moment was funny, Carson sensed the fine line between entertainment and causing controversy. And this wasn't the only time he would navigate that challenge. Number 23. The Smothers Brothers' silent exit. During the early 1990s, Tommy Smothers, who was one half of the well-known comedy duo Smothers Brothers, made an appearance on The Tonight Show hosted by Johnny Carson. Tommy was known for being courageous and speaking openly about his opinions. His comedy frequently involved clever political jokes, and he was not afraid to address controversial subjects. Despite potentially making people feel uneasy, he earned respect for standing up for his beliefs. When Tommy appeared on the show with Johnny Carson that night, Everything seemed to be going well initially. They shared some jokes and funny stories, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. However, as the conversation progressed, Tommy's attitude changed. Instead of just sticking to jokes and casual conversation, he started making subtle comments that seemed to question the content of the show and even Johnny himself. Initially, Carson tried to brush off the situation, as he typically did. He was famous for being composed in stressful situations and making everyone feel comfortable. However, this time, his smile began to disappear. He became quiet, and his usual friendly demeanor seemed to diminish. The audience, noticing the shift in atmosphere, also started to feel uneasy. An awkward tension filled the space, and no one was sure how to respond. Suddenly, Tommy Smothers got up and left the stage without saying goodbye or making a joke. Johnny was surprised and did not know how to react. The audience was confused about whether it was planned or not. Number 22. When his privacy wasn't respected. In 1979, when Tom Snyder was filling in as a guest host on The Tonight Show, he said something about Carson's divorce that upset him. Carson was very upset when he found out about what Snyder had said. Carson was very protective of his personal life, particularly when it came to his marriages and divorces. People who worked on the show said Carson was so mad about the situation that he thought about never letting Snyder host again. Carson hated that his personal problems were being talked about on his TV show, where he usually had full control over how he was seen by the public. Because of this, he made stricter rules for guest hosts on what they could talk about on his show. From protecting his private life to battling guests who tried to steal the spotlight, Carson's clashes did not end with Snyder. Next up, a TV legend who went too far. Number 21. The night Milton Berle took over. Milton Berle, a television pioneer also known as Uncle Milty, made an appearance on The Tonight Show in 1965. During his time on the show, Berle demonstrated how an old-school performer can dominate the spotlight. Coming from a background of vaudeville and early television where competition for camera time was fierce, Berle essentially took over the show. He continuously interrupted Carson, told lengthy stories without allowing Carson to speak, and even began directing the band and cameras on his own. Carson took pride in being in charge of his show, but he couldn't stand Berle's controlling attitude. While he stayed calm on camera, behind the scenes, Carson lost his temper and warned his producer not to invite Berle without clear instructions on following the show's rules. This event added to Carson's reputation for being selective about which comedians could sit on the couch after their acts, a special privilege he would deny to those who did not respect his rules. Number 20. The Rich Little Band. Rich Little was a popular celebrity in the 1960s and 1970s, known for his accurate impersonations of famous people like celebrities, politicians, and TV hosts. One of his best impersonations was of Johnny Carson, who was a beloved late-night TV host. People always enjoyed watching Rich on The Tonight Show because they knew he would make them laugh. Things were not as easy as they seemed behind the scenes. Even though Rich's impression of Johnny was smart and amusing, Carson did not find it as humorous as the audience did. As time passed, the constant impersonations began to bother him. Johnny was good at hiding his emotions on camera, but in private, he cared a lot about how he was depicted. The more Rich imitated Carson's voice and gestures, the more Johnny appeared to be offended by it. Eventually, Johnny got fed up and quietly stopped inviting Rich Little to the show. Fans noticed he was gone because he had been a regular for a long time. Some fans were surprised by this decision since Rich had brought laughs and good ratings to the show. However, Johnny felt it was necessary to maintain control of his image and thought the jokes had become excessive. Number 19. Myrtle Young's Potato Chips. Prank gone wrong. Not all awkward situations on the show were caused by difficult celebrities. Sometimes Carson's pranks went wrong. In 1987, an older woman named Myrtle Young was showcasing her collection of potato chips that looked like famous people. After showing a few examples, Carson asked her to step aside briefly. When she turned her back, Carson grabbed a regular chip from under his desk and noisily ate it. Myrtle was horrified when she thought he had eaten one of her cherished items and almost fainted. Carson felt immediate regret for his prank after witnessing her genuine distress. According to Henry Bushkin's book about Johnny Carson, the TV host later admitted to his staff that he felt bad for playing the prank on Myrtle. Carson's remorse was evident from the look on his face as he reassured Myrtle that it was just a normal chip. This incident haunted Carson for many years. In a PBS interview from 2012, Tonight Show writer Andrew Nichols mentioned that Carson sometimes mentioned it as a joke he regretted and wished he could undo. This was uncommon for Carson, as he rarely admitted to making mistakes. Number 18. The night Carson lost control. In 1979, Tina Jeter, an animal trainer, brought a chimpanzee named Mr. Jiggs to the show. At first, Mr. Jiggs performed tricks and won over the audience. However, things took a turn when Johnny Carson tried to engage with the chimp directly. Mr. Jiggs ignored Carson's commands and started causing chaos on set by pulling cables and climbing onto the lighting rig, where he refused to come down. The show had to unexpectedly stop airing for a commercial while trying to get the animal under control. When the show came back on, Carson jokingly mentioned how he prefers working with human guests. Carson was annoyed by this incident because it showed a big mistake on television: losing control of your show. He was clearly unhappy with the animal trainer, and memos later showed that there would be stricter rules for future animal guests. If a chimp scaling the lights wasn't enough chaos for one show, what came next left Carson gagging, and the studio audience gasping for air. Number 17. The elephant's unforgettable entrance. In 1977, Carson had a guest who brought a baby elephant on the show. At first, Carson liked the elephant, but then it got scared of the lights and urinated all over the floor. The audience laughed, but Carson was not happy. The smell was bad, so Carson had to move his desk to finish the show. Carson was extremely frustrated because the incident seemed to never end as the stagehands struggled to clean up the mess while the cameras kept recording. After that experience, Carson made a rule that larger animals on the show must have protective flooring and quick access to cleanup crews. Number 16. When the Camel Bit Back. In 1986, zoologist Jim Fowler appeared on The Tonight Show with a young camel. Fowler suggested that host Johnny Carson feed the camel a carrot, promising that it was friendly. However, when Carson offered the carrot, the camel unexpectedly bit his fingers. Carson was not hurt badly, but he was obviously shocked and in pain. It was awkward to watch Carson try to stay calm while dealing with the surprise bite. His fake smile and short, unfriendly conversations with Fowler showed regular viewers that he was upset about the sudden pain. Peter Lasley, who has worked with Carson for a long time, shared in a documentary from 2012 called Johnny Carson, King of Late Night, that this event caused Carson to make a rule against interacting with animals on the show, leaving that task to the experts instead. Number 15. The Panther That Pounced. In 1975, animal trainer Ron Shannon took a supposedly domesticated black panther on The Tonight Show. Carson, trying to look brave, went near the cage of the big cat during a break to see it better. Unexpectedly, the panther suddenly attacked the cage, trying to swipe at Carson's face with its paw. Even though the cage kept him safe, Carson was so surprised that he visibly moved backward and ended up falling on the studio floor. The audience laughed loudly as a shaken Carson went back to his desk, trying to hide his real fear. The director of the show filmed Carson falling, and that moment was shown repeatedly on outtake compilations, which was very embarrassing for Carson. Carson's producer, Fred Cordova, revealed in an interview for the book King of the Night by Lawrence Lemur that Carson was upset because the incident went against his image of being cool and composed. Carson was not only bothered by the fall itself, but also by the fact that he became the joke on his show, something he tried hard to prevent. Number 14. The Defecating Marmette. In 1969, animal expert Joan Embry went on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson and brought a small marmoset as a guest for a fun and entertaining segment. The little monkey initially won over the audience with its cute and calm behavior. Joan then passed the animal to Carson, who happily welcomed it onto his shoulder, anticipating a fun and light-hearted interaction. However, things took an embarrassing turn quickly. Out of nowhere, the marmoset climbed onto Carson's shoulder and sat on his neatly styled hair. Shockingly, the animal peed on his head in front of everyone watching, which included a horrified Carson. The urine flowed down his neck, causing the host's expression to shift from amusement to silent shock. Despite managing to maintain his composure and crack a few jokes on camera, Carson was said to be extremely angry once he was off stage. He quickly took a shower and wanted to have his hair fixed before going back on the show. Carson had a reputation for being well-groomed and composed, so he felt humiliated by the incident. As a result of the mishap, The Tonight Show put stricter rules in place for how animals were treated on the show. The incident was one of the most memorable and awkward live moments in the show's history, especially for Carson. Just when you think nothing could top a marmoset's bathroom break, along came Madonna in a black bustier. Number 13. Madonna's lingerie interview. In June 1987, Madonna appeared on The Tonight Show for the first time wearing a black bustier as a top. When she came on stage, many people noticed that Johnny Carson looked uneasy. The tension got even worse when Madonna mentioned she picked Carson's show because she wanted him to be her first guest. People watching said Carson tried to stay calm and went along with Madonna's bold remarks, but he was clearly not at ease. After the segment finished, sources behind the scenes said that Carson was frustrated, mentioning that the discussion had gone off track. He apparently thought the suggestive attitude did not match the reputation he had established. People close to him called it an unexpected clash of cultures, which made Carson uncomfortable and left a strong impact. Number 12. Charles Grodens' confrontational appearances. In the early 1990s, Charles Grodin began appearing on The Tonight Show with a sharp style that many thought was intentional. People on the show noticed that Grodin would often directly challenge Johnny Carson, saying things that seemed to surprise the host. One time, Grodin even asked Carson if he had read his book, making Carson visibly uncomfortable. Those familiar with the show said Carson eventually realized the humor in the confrontation and started to go along with them. Carson's friends and colleagues mentioned that the experience made him feel very uncomfortable. He was used to conducting interviews confidently and smoothly, not defending his professionalism. In private, Carson reportedly acknowledged that even though viewers loved the segments, they left him feeling emotionally exhausted after each recording. Number 11. The Carson-Rivers professional tension. Johnny Carson and Joan Rivers had a difficult relationship before their big disagreement. From 1983, she regularly filled in for him on his show. But when NBC suggested she could replace him, Carson felt uncomfortable. In 1985, Rivers publicly mentioned that NBC had a list of potential replacements and she wasn't on it. NBC denied having a list, but the damage was already done. Rivers wanted to feel appreciated, while Carson was upset by the idea of being replaced. This tension increased and eventually led to their falling out, causing Carson a lot of hurt professionally. Number 10. Frank Sinatra hijacks the set. In 1976, Frank Sinatra went on The Tonight Show to talk about his new album, but once he got on stage, it was clear he had different ideas. Instead of a normal interview, Sinatra took control, interrupting Carson, changing the subject, and even asking Carson questions himself, completely changing the dynamic of the show. Carson was visibly annoyed despite smiling and laughing, as he preferred to be in control. Unlike other guests, Carson couldn't speak up without facing potential negative consequences. Sinatra's huge fame made Carson feel sidelined on his stage for an entire hour. A biographer later wrote that Carson had never felt so intimidated on television. An NBC executive shared that Carson later complained about feeling like a guest on his show. And just when Carson thought things couldn't unravel any further, his very desk betrayed him. Number 9. The desk collapse that shook Carson. In 1987, while doing his usual monologue, Carson accidentally broke his desk with a pencil while making a joke about old movie theaters. The audience found it funny, but Carson was stunned. The desk was more than just furniture to him, it symbolized his power and authority. Losing it on live television made him feel like he had lost control. After a moment of shocked silence, he quickly made a joke and continued standing while the crew hurried to fix the mistake. The audience laughed, but Carson felt uneasy. He saw it as a clear indication that both his set and the show needed significant improvements due to their age. Number 8. The psychic that couldn't perform. In 1973, Uri Geller, who said he had psychic abilities, appeared on The Tonight Show to demonstrate his powers. However, he did not realize that the host, Johnny Carson, along with skeptic James Randi, were ready to debunk him. Carson's team gave Geller different props than he was used to working with. This caused Geller to struggle to bend spoons, move compasses, or read drawings like he claimed to do before. He tried to explain his failures by saying he wasn't feeling well. Carson appeared polite, but he was secretly pleased. He had set a trap for Geller, who fell right into it. However, the plan did not work as intended. Instead of making Geller look bad, the failure made people believe in him more. The audience saw his struggle as genuine, not fake. Carson's attempt to expose Geller as a fraud ended up giving him more attention and support. Number 7. When Don Rickles crossed the line. In 1976, on The Tonight Show, Don Rickles accidentally broke Johnny Carson's special wooden cigarette box. Carson tried to act cool on camera, but backstage, he was angry. That box belonged to Carson on The Tonight Show. Fred Cordova, a producer on the show, mentioned that Carson was very upset and thought Rickles went too far. Even though Carson was usually calm under pressure, this incident showed a new side of him, the man who could handle jokes, but not the invasion of his personal space. Number 6. The Vanessa Williams controversy. Back in 1984, Vanessa Williams made history by being the first black woman to win the Miss America pageant. Her win was a significant moment that brought pride and inspiration to many. However, not everyone was supportive of her victory. Some people had negative things to say and made offensive comments. During a monologue on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson, he made a comment about Vanessa's win possibly being influenced by a black judge. The joke got mixed reactions, with some laughing and others finding it offensive. The remark seemed to belittle Vanessa's skills, smarts, and looks. It implied she did not win her title on merit, but through favoritism. This came at a tough time for Vanessa, with lots of public scrutiny already. Number 5. When Farah Faucet left Johnny Carson speechless. Farah Faucet, who was famous for her role in Charlie's Angels, went on The Tonight Show in June 1980. It turned out to be a very awkward interview for Johnny Carson. When she sat down, Faucet seemed distracted and had trouble expressing her thoughts clearly. She went off on tangents and told stories that did not make sense. Lawrence Lemur's book, King of the Night, tells us that Johnny Carson tried to steer the conversation back on track multiple times, but Farah Faucet kept getting off topic. She often lost her train of thought and did not finish her sentences. Audience members in the studio could see that they felt uneasy. Carson was trying hard to keep the show running smoothly, which he usually did without any problems, but this time, viewers could see that he was upset, which rarely happened. A production assistant named Peter Lasley mentioned in a 2012 PBS documentary that Carson was furious once the cameras were off. He was angry at the booking staff for not informing him about Faucet's condition beforehand. Alcohol rumors were going around, but her team denied them later. However, the harm was already done. What upset Carson the most wasn't the idea of being drunk. It was that his well-planned show had been ruined in front of everyone. One moment can derail an empire, but one joke, it nearly wiped out a household necessity. Number 4. The toilet paper panic. Carson did not see coming. In December 1973, Johnny Carson made a joke on The Tonight Show about a shortage of toilet paper, which caused a panic among viewers and led to empty shelves in grocery stores. A joke caused a real shortage of toilet paper to last for weeks. Carson was surprised. Embarrassed by the consequences, he used his platform to take back what he said, apologizing on television. He acknowledged that he had caused a problem. He did not intend for his jokes to cause chaos. It showed the unexpected influence of television. Carson, who was skilled at influencing media, did not realize how much impact his words had. This was more than a lesson in public panic. It made Carson realize the power of his words. Number 3. The betrayal. Johnny Carson never forgave. In 1986, Johnny Carson faced a huge betrayal when Joan Rivers, his longtime guest host, started making plans to have her late-night show on the new Fox network. Rivers had earned Carson's trust as she stood in for him on his show and gained popularity with viewers. Carson did not hear the information from her. He heard it from people working in the industry. Rivers claimed she attempted to contact Carson before the news got out, but he did not trust her. He held a grudge against her. The evening before the news was revealed, Rivers appeared on Carson's show, laughing and recalling memories. She was wearing the same dress she had worn 21 years ago when she first appeared on his show. She did not let on that she would soon be competing against him. Immediately after the incident, Carson banned her from appearing on NBC. They never communicated again, even though she tried to make amends multiple times. Other hosts of The Tonight Show also supported the ban. Rivers did not make a return to the show until 2014, nearly 10 years after Carson passed away. Carson took the departure of Rivers personally as she was a close friend. He was hurt by her decision not to inform him directly. In later years, Carson avoided talking about Rivers or simply said, "No comment." He even pretended not to know her when her name was mentioned. The hurt he felt from her betrayal was evident not from what he said, but from what he chose not to say. Number 2. The Newton Showdown. In 1980, Johnny Carson told jokes about Wayne Newton's high voice and feminine behavior. When Newton came on the show in 1981, there was tension right away. Instead of talking about his new project, Newton called out Carson for the jokes. It was uncomfortable because Newton was clearly mad when he said, "I do not like being made fun of. I've been nice for too long." According to the producer Peter Lasley, who was quoted in the 2012 PBS documentary about Johnny Carson, the argument between Carson and Newton was even more intense when they were not on the air, with Newton making comments that Carson saw as threats. Carson was upset about being criticized for his comedy on his show, especially in front of a live audience. This incident broke Carson's rule of not discussing personal matters on camera. After the incident, Newton was not allowed to appear on Carson's show for a long time, but they later made up. Carson told his head writer that he could talk about him in private, but on his show, he was in charge. Number 1. The Brooke Shields. Prank gone wrong. In 1981, Brooke Shields was one of the most popular young celebrities in America. She was well-known, attractive, and still a teenager when she made an appearance on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. Brooke wanted to do something fun and surprising, so she planned to play a harmless joke on Johnny when she entered the stage. She had a simple plan. She wanted to pretend to fall when entering, hoping to make Johnny laugh and show her fun side. However, things did not go as expected. When she entered and faked a trip, the fall seemed too realistic. Johnny, without knowing it was a joke, quickly got up, concerned that she might be injured. The crowd was shocked, not sure if it was planned or a genuine accident. The fun atmosphere of the evening turned serious for a little while. Johnny quickly went to Brooke, looking worried. Brooke then revealed it was just a joke. She smiled, waiting to see if the prank was successful. However, instead of laughing, there was an awkward silence. The audience wasn't sure how to respond. Johnny was able to salvage the situation by making a few quick remarks, but the harm had already been done. His attempt at humor ended up causing real concern, and the atmosphere never fully recovered. This incident demonstrated the challenges of trying to catch someone off guard, particularly in a live TV setting. If you enjoyed this video, like and subscribe, and also click the next video shown on your screen.